Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Boldrick. I work for EPA Region 10. I sit in the Alaska Operations Office. I wanted to start out this meeting talking about a little bit about IARPIC, just in case you're new here. So IARPIC is the Interagency Arctic Research Policy Committee. It brings together folks from 18 different federal agencies, departments, and offices across the U.S. federal government. So we work really closely with our sister organization, the Arctic Research Commission. But we bring together federal researchers, non-federal researchers, and Arctic communities. And I will say generally those are our tribal entities and partners. Um, so there's several different permafrost or several different communities of practice and different teams in IARPIC. Um, I really focus on permafrost. We also have Anna. Do you want to briefly introduce yourself, Anna, and then I'll keep going?
Thanks, Lauren. Good morning, everyone. Anna Lidio, Homer, Alaska Woodwell Climate Research Center. I'm one of the co-leads in the risk and hazard team, and we also have Tom and Sandy and Liza who are here today on that team as well. And yeah, so this is a really exciting, Lauren, that we have this joint IARPIC team meeting today.
Yeah, so I have worked closely with a lot of different folks across IARPIC, but also worked really closely with my cohort, Nicole Briggs, who's on the phone. Nicole, do you want to say hi really quick and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Nicole Briggs. I work at EPA Region 10 out of our Seattle office, and I'm a manager in our environmental assessment branch, which is in our science division, where a lot of work on permafrost and other scientific topics take place. And my apologies for being late. My computer decided to restart itself 15 times, but it's working now.
Glad to see you're here, Nicole. So Nicole and I have worked with our colleagues at EPA and folks in our Office of Research and Development to come up with a needs assessment, basically. And so I'm gonna try to share my screen, and then we can kind of get into our presentation for today. It's working for everyone?
Yep.
Okay. I am going to turn off my video because I hate seeing myself move while I'm trying to present at the same time. Nicole, you can be up there since you can be our mascot for today. So hi, everyone. Again, Lauren
Gladly.
Boldrick. I'm here with Nicole Briggs from EPA. Let's see if I can navigate this thing. So just first of all, there's a lot of different kinds of permafrost, throughout Alaska. Down in Anchorage, we normally encounter discontinuous permafrost, but as we get up in the Arctic, we'll see continuous permafrost where you're only seeing non-icebound sediments in that active layer, basically. I'd say this is very generalized for all the scientists on the phone during that summer season. But, once you get down deep enough, you really have that continuous permafrost where that soil matrix is frozen all year long. But that's really where the active layer is changing and how contaminants are moving is what is in our purview for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and how we've looked at what we need. And Nicole, please feel free to interrupt me at any time. Um, our main concern for EPA in our regulatory realm is how landscape changes are impacting how water moves in the environment. And so you can see as the climate warms, the permafrost degrades and surface water increases, and also the ability for aquifers and surface water to talk, so that surface and subsurface water to interact and move around and move contaminants around in water, especially as it affects drinking water supply, is something that EPA is really thinking a lot about right now. And as I was saying, how permafrost degradation destabilizes infrastructure, increases that contaminant transport is something that we're focusing on. I have to call out Autumn Wiseman on the phone right now. She's been working really hard on a research project for Class 3 landfills. And so that is also available online. There's great resources, but I have to plug that research project because that's going great. For oil and gas work on in the North Slope Borough, we really think a lot about, well, where the wells are. We permit underground injection control wells. And so that's really injection wells for different things. And the state of Alaska has primacy over some of those sub-programmatic wells. But generally speaking, we really take a hard look at drilling sites, along with those, different mega industrial infrastructure projects like mining, or I would say, what else is in that group? Forestry. There's a lot of big things that go on in permafrost zones. When it gets more specific to villages, we look at those landfills. We also look where bulk fuel storage tanks are because we have different authorities to work with villages for their oil spill response plans for those sites. Pipelines, that's on this image too, but really we kind of consider that in the drilling sites and oil and gas realm, and then dumped or accidentally lost waste. That's something that our oil spill response folks work on too. So really we kind of think of, going from left to right. You can kind of see that there's a couple of different components that we think through this in the ecosystem impacts perspective. We really think about villages and how they operate and what needs they have, and then industrial sites, and then emergency response. I would say kind of our three big buckets. So this is kind of what we have figured out is the current state of permafrost data internal to EPA. And so this is what our scientists and program specialists have self-reported out through interviews or just collaborations with Nicole and I. And so that's, limited observational data. They have a lot of big needs. So the thing that we pulled out, which is great while we have Anna here to talk about later, is that when it comes down to it, our scientists and everyone else, the thing everyone can agree on is that we just need better maps. And so that data scarcity really all builds up into having maps available to have transparency and federal decision making. We can give a lot of water quality data or soils data to the scientists, but when they go out and work with the public likes to see maps of where things are. They don't necessarily want to know how contaminants are moving, just whether or not their water quality is impacted, for example. We also have been thinking a lot about the economic risk that comes along from building infrastructure, and when we're working on those permit approvals, we'll get to that in a little bit more detail later on. But not being able to have data for public transparency and just really how we work through our permitting process, there's a lot of economic risk there that we get into when we're working with our project proponents. Nicole, any comments or questions before we go to the next slide? Am I missing anything so far?
No, you're doing great. I'm
Okay.
monitoring the chat too. So
Okay, thank you. So as I've touched on, we really think permafrost research is really necessary. We've been working through IARPC and through our internal EPA channels and also with the Arctic Council on several different things. I called out earlier landfills. That's something that we're hyper focused on. The impacts of permafrost degradation to subsistence. And so that is through ice cellars or when permafrost is melting and degrading, and that could be dropping metals into water. That's something that we're really interested in, and I know Park Service has worked a lot on. Also just general drinking water impacts, water quality, whether that is sediments or other chemicals coming into the mix. So villages are a big thing. Critical infrastructure, as with mining right now, and especially critical minerals mining, we're taking a hard look at that, about how permafrost degradation can impact mining and oil and gas sites. And then just general environmental interests and concerns. We're really thinking a lot about subsidence and where things are being built. That's another thing that we get into with either environmental assessments or permit writing. So I just wanted to give a little bit more specificity for our regulatory purview. So, we talked about oil spill responders. That's under the Oil Pollution Act, RCRA, which is our Resource Conservation Recovery Act, National Environmental Policy Act. That's kind of the large mega industrial reviews. Clean Water Act and Safe Water Drinking Act go pretty hand in hand for how we look at how drinkable your water is and how clean your water is. I'm not going to talk about landfills more, but for flooding and erosion, the contamination of drinking water sources, land loss, we really think about subsistence, but also, there's so many of our bulk fuel storage tank farms that are built right on the edge of rivers for that accessibility piece of when they come refill those tanks. But also on the same time, it makes it easy to access, but also it makes them more susceptible to climate change. And so there's several villages that we're talking to and working through Denali Commission on, um, analyzing what bulk fuel tank farms are at most risk. We also think about relocation. We've been really integrated in that along different pathways. And then we've talked a little bit about ice cellars and food storage. That's something else we focused on in the Arctic. Wastewater and water infrastructure engineering. We work really closely with ANTHC, but when we're thinking about water and wastewater, we're trying to understand of where harmful algal blooms could happen. And I have a slide on that later. So that's a specific thing that we're thinking about, where this infrastructure will be built. We're working really closely with the state of Alaska on, because we want to make sure that the grants that we're giving out and the projects that we're funding are going to be built in good places. And so trying to figure out what those long-term climate projections are for where we want to fund new water and wastewater treatment facilities in villages, either on the coast or on rivers. That's another place where we're spending a lot of time thinking about permafrost. Harmful algal blooms, again, I think it's starting to be able to see we're really focused on how does it impact people, how will it impact industry, and how will it impact the environment. So harmful algal blooms is going back between people and the environment, because we're really wanting to understand not only where these blooms will be happening, but also, how are we going to impact the people who are out there eating subsistence foods like shellfish. Right now, the National Environmental Policy Act and how EPA and the other federal agencies analyze projects is rapidly changing. But something that EPA is really pushing for is that, expedited permitting and reviews can go faster if you have good foundational data. And so I think this under NEPA is where we've spent a lot of time and energy just trying to understand what data exists and what the big moving pieces are out there. And so right now it seems like the closest we've gotten is really focusing on projects could happen in the North Slope Borough. And then also, I just totally blanked. What is the strait that Nome is on? We were just talking about that project. This is for Nicole too.
Seward Peninsula.
Thank you, Seward Peninsula. We've also been looking at water quality information out on the Seward Peninsula for mining projects. For RCRA, we have specific places where North Slope Borough or different entities would like to build temporary or long-term hazardous storage sites. And so understanding where those sites are and where we could ensure that hazardous waste was contained for the long term, really to prevent seepage to surface water and groundwater. That is a particular focus for us right now in Prudhoe Bay. And so we're really focused on fate and transport, but we're also just curious about how subsidence is happening and impacting those pipelines and oil well cellars. Down near the Fairbanks area, we have 2 different Superfund sites under CERCLA. And so that is a good example for us to say like, hey, permafrost thaw is already creating these preferential pathways where contaminants will migrate, and we've seen it migrate into community water systems here. And so understanding how those remedies are selected and how treatments are selected, this is just kind of a good case study for us on something that we would like to recreate. So not that contaminated site, of course, but how we go through the process of understanding how things are moving in the environment. Um, this is just a project that we are proud of. Emergency response. This goes all over for us, really. We are on call 24/7. We think about permafrost when we're working in the Arctic and subarctic all the time, and we're constantly working on approving plans that have lacking data, and it just makes it really difficult to understand how to conduct spill responses or plan spill responses when you don't know what the changing environment is like. So our oil spill response folks want all of the data that we can get today, immediately. Underground injection control is coming up with particular interest right now in the North Slope because of carbon sequestration. So those are our Class 6 wells. The state of Alaska is trying to get primacy over that program as we speak. They anticipate that maybe in the next year or so, that program will be approved for primacy. But we're really looking in that program to understand how potential thaw in the permafrost will affect the stability of those injection wells. And so it's more important to us than other injection wells because those CO2 plumes are supercritical CO2. So it's an aqueous material or fluid, I guess. And so compared to some of the other injection um, things, that's something that we really want to make sure that those are securely underground. Then for air quality, this is something that we'd like to get more into, but aren't as much into it, I think, as we would like to be. But I think wildfires are the big thing here that I keep hearing interest about that we already have a lot of experience in. But understanding how melting permafrost leads to wildfire prevalence and severity, and the feedback loop there. Also understanding how smoke from those wildfires can degrade and impact tribal communities is an active area for us in Region 10 that we work in, but would like to bring to Alaska. And then this is kind of our general environmental concerns. We think a lot about methane hydrates. We think about infectious diseases, just general emissions that are coming from the wildfires and the permafrost itself. And then just kind of our compiled programmatic needs. You know, it when we have gone through and looked at all of these different things, the Venn diagram just quickly becomes, a circle. Uh, you know, that current conditions map that I kind of alluded to earlier, when we get down to it, we really just want the best maps that we can of current and future conditions. Um, it would also be great to have a vulnerabilities map. I talked about that with all of the villages and tribal work we do, as well as our oil spill response people. And then looking forward, a community planning map. If we can help people understand where they could have those relocations or where they can get their drinking water source from or where they can build infrastructure, that's something that we'd really like to use those maps for too. There's so much space here, and this is a very quick and dirty presentation, and I am excited to have our discussions later, but I want to highlight that, as we go along through these discussions, if you think there's something that we would be interested in, I would love to hear from it later, but I'm just trying to pause on this slide a little bit because I think this is kind of the sum of the whole paper. We have these different programs that work on a lot of different things, but in the end, we just want some good maps, and we want to keep working on, I think, probably contaminated groundwater at large. I think that's where we have the most space to work right now in our changing administration. But I think there's space to go ahead soon in the future with other things. We're actively thinking about these programmatic needs right now and working on them and getting good support for them. I think that's it for now. That was very quick, and I think we have a lot of time for discussion and some good questions up for discussion. I'm going to stop sharing. Nicole, is there anything you want to add, or do you want me to go back to a slide of additional
No,
information? Because
I think that
you've
was
done
a
a lot of
great
work this too.
overview.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is kind of a, like, just to kind of take a step back, this is a long-standing work project between Region 10 and our colleagues and former colleagues in the Office of Research and Development at EPA. And basically, we're every year trying to make incremental progress on this. So we've had, as Lauren summed up, we developed or identified an overarching need for better mapping of current and future conditions. And we've had some progress on that, and we're continuing to push for that on various levels to the degree that we can, and always looking for partnerships, ideas, or resources that we can pull in and use for our programmatic needs in that area. I'd love to hear from other folks who are on the call today. I'd love to hear what resonated for you from this presentation, where there might be analogs in the work that you're doing, ideas that you have. It looks like I see somebody raising their hand. Is Howie raising their hand?
Yes, I am raising my hand. I was trying to find the the button that would allow me to do the yellow hand. I couldn't find it. So Lauren and Nicole, and others from EPA, but I apologize in advance for getting a bit political right off the bat. But the irony here is really
Can I pause you really quick,
yeah,
Howie? I forgot to
yeah,
say this earlier. For anything Nicole and I say, these are our personal opinions. They do not reflect the agency.
yeah,
We'll give a status update, but these are personal opinions.
yeah.
So
Got it. Understood.
yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
the reason I wanted to I want to bring this up because the irony is really it's just smacking me in the face that that the EPA terminated $150 million in community change grants to Alaska. And the rationale for the termination was that the the goals of the grant don't no longer match the priorities of the organization. And based on what you told me, that's not true. Like the last slide that you showed about programmatic needs for EPA, from what I know, matched extremely well with at least some of those grants that were terminated. And I can't so how do we reconcile that? Where on one hand, the EPA is telling us that these projects don't meet their priorities, and on the other hand, you're telling us what your priorities are, and they're the same. So, and I'm sorry, but it was just like it was so obvious. It's so obvious to me that this is an issue. So I had to bring it up.
Lauren, do you want me to take that, or would you like to take that?
We can both probably. Go ahead, Nicole.
Yeah, thank you, Howie. That was a very informed comment, and I hear your frustration. I know I've heard it from others also. I think, as with any new administration, we're still moving forward under this administration and working to define priorities. And it's not always entirely clear that it's a straight path forward. There is a winding path through which we identify priorities and work. And so I hear the disappointment with the canceling of the grants. And I think we try to think about these issues holistically as topical. So the grants didn't move forward, but perhaps there is something that we can do internally here on similar issues that could address some of the same needs or some of the other programmatic needs that we've identified. So I can see how it appears to be at odds with itself. And, like any big organization, nothing is entirely linear. We are working towards our overall goals. Our mission at EPA is to protect human health and the environment. And so we're trying to keep our eye on that guiding light while moving forward under the parameters that we've been given under the current administration that we work for.
Yeah. Okay. I do appreciate that comment. I mean, it just seems like not that everybody's not on the same page. And it just seems, it just, if that, it just seems wrong to, on one hand, to terminate these grants and then on the next say, hey, we need this is what we need. It didn't make a lot of sense to me, but in some way I understand and I get it. So thank you. I appreciate your addressing that. And now others want to ask more substantive comments about
Yeah. I
Thanks.
also, I want to kind of make sure that we're staying on track with our agenda. And so I hear you, Howie. We also have more space for discussion in a minute, and I want to make sure I advocate for our Enviro Atlas. That was something on the agenda that I did not talk about. And so Enviro Atlas is a great tool that we have at EPA. And it's basically our way to share all of our climate data sets and then just other mapping data sets with you. And Tanya Spiro, who's one of Nicole and I's co-authors, was one of our primary people that worked on Enviro Atlas. And so I have to make sure in her honor to share that with everyone. I'm going to put that in the chat. But also, Anna, I wanted to give you a chance to talk about some of your work. Anna has been a great partner working along on some of our EPA work and has some great tools to share. And so once we can, I think, Howie, maybe it will be helpful to you to kind of hear about the tools and where we're trying to go forward. And then maybe think about some partnership development between what Meredith brought up with the Arctic Research Plan, if there's interest that we talked about, where you want to try to build a partnership. I think that'd be something that we're really interested in hearing about. And then I think that's it for now. But I do want to make sure Anna gets a fair shot because she has some great stuff that I think will be useful and helpful to everyone.
Thank you, Lauren. Yeah, so Lauren really raised the need from the end user standpoint of what data the EPA needs in regards to permafrost and permafrost hazards. And we do have a lot of research as a science community. We have created information and data, everything from models to remote sensing and field measurements. And I think it's the community is making great progress with various tools that are in development to make that data findable and also accessible so people can download it. And so I wanted to highlight three. There's more out there. And I'll copy here. Maybe Meredith, you can copy the three links there that I will share here on the screen. So the first one that I wanted to share with you all is the State of Alaska Geoportal. And this is Lindsay at the State of Alaska. She's leading this effort, and it's a wonderful research bringing together various kinds of data specifically for Alaska. There's infrastructure data sets that from many communities. There's LiDAR databases and so on. So it links out to various resources, both within the State of Alaska and also outside of the State of Alaska. And so this, I think, is a really key hub for us to work together and connect both the data creators and the data users. And the other one is the UAF-led Arctic EDS, the Arctic Environmental and Engineering Data and Design Support System. And they're really focusing on the climate aspect, the climate data, and really emphasizing on expanding and modernizing the resource that engineers have used in Alaska for a long time. It was a report showing our climate variables across Alaska. So here you can let's go to Fairbanks, and you get a report created for Fairbanks, and for example, these tables of air temperature and precipitation and so on for that specific community. And they also have map data. So I'll scroll up here and we can look at permafrost specifically. So precipitation comes first, then we have permafrost here, and get temperature here at the model temperature and so on. So these are maps available and produced by the Geophysical Institute, the Permafrost Laboratory up there. And so both these tools are still under development, and the same here on the third one. Trent will have you add more to the State of Alaska GeoPortal. You know more. So the third one I want to mention first is the Permafrost Discovery Gateway, that project that I'm leading in collaboration with the Arctic Data Center. So this software is available for anyone to apply to whatever kind of data set that they're interested in, and it's focusing on big geospatial data, so data that makes ArcGIS otherwise crash. So here is Utqiagvik with buildings and roads mapped and ice ridge polygons mapped, and then if you zoom out, you can see ice ridge polygons mapped here across the Lower, the North Slope, and then also later in the Arctic. So where you have these ice ridge polygons, that's where we have ice ridge permafrost, and where building infrastructure becomes more complicated. And something I think when we work and share with data, it's both the fair aspect and also the care aspect of the data. So it's one thing to make the data findable, accessible, and reusable, and there's another thing to use it, to share it and use it responsibly. Both of the people that are creating the data and that might be the original source of the data too, especially indigenous communities. And so having that in mind, and I think a third thing that I wanted to mention is that we have AI as a new tool to us today, and that we have so much yet to do, I think, here in the permafrost community and Arctic community of how we integrate AI into both enabling data access and data reuse, and how we are transparent about how we are using AI, or how people want to engage in AI as they use the data. So lots more for us to work on and discuss there. And yeah, I'll leave it there. Trent, would you like to add something to the Alaska GeoPortal?
Yeah, thanks, Anna. Just a couple of things. One, I just want to point out too, we have some geologic maps. There's a geologic mapping app that's available through the DGGS website, where you can go and you can see what kinds of available maps are out there. And I know we're trying to get a lot more of those into digital format as time moves on. So I think that's a really useful resource they can find through through the website too. And it's part of that whole same sort of system, if you will. And you mentioned the LiDAR data, but I also want, back to something they were talking about a little earlier with weather station data. This summer we managed to get up on the slope near Otkasuk and Wainwright. We've got 4 or 5 weather stations up there where we're collecting some data. And I think getting that data, making that available through some of your outlets would also be great. And it's one of those things where, there's going to be a sunset on when we're able to collect that data, and we're looking to try to continue collecting that data. So, if there are ways we can develop partnerships to continue collecting that data, I think that would be good, as well as we're doing some stream gauge data as well. And then last thing, and I'll let some other folks talk, we are doing some desktop-based terrain unit mapping, which I think shows conditions of the surface sort of to the extent that we can when we had the imagery. But as a basis for change, when you're looking at permafrost change, I think that those kinds of maps can be very useful as well. And, we're looking at that sort of coming out here in the next year, but I'm happy to talk with folks about ways that we might improve that sort of product as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Trent. I wish you guys, your office were like 10 times bigger than you are. There's so much to do, and you're doing amazing work. Thank you, Trent.
I think we have a question in the chat. The initials KJ. Should I read this question, or does the person who asked this question want to ask? There we go. There you are.
Hi, I'm the one who typed it in. So this has been kind of on my mind. When you talked about contaminated water, I thought of my home community and how the people who hold the knowledge of where contamination might have happened are usually elders who were in the military or National Guard when the tanks were left wherever they were left with whatever was in them.
Mhm.
And like I know the IGAP exists in these communities, and usually the people that are employed under IGAP are younger and they don't know that history. And how are we making sure, well, not we, but how are agencies making sure that the knowledge that's collected is accurate and correct? And how are we ensuring that we pay the people who know? Because that's part of the fair and care of data, compensating people for what they know and what they do, fairly, not just like here's whatever. Part of my work, I that's kind of a lot of the questions I get in my work. Brianna.
Thank you. Um, Anna had brought up the fair and care principles, so that's another presentation that we've done before. But I would say, generally speaking, I think EPA is very aware of compensation for time. So thank you for bringing that up. I think that is very important. Uh, as you can imagine, EPA is very large, and I am not one of the travel liaisons in the IGAP program, so I don't know exactly how they compensate that or compensate for that in IGAP. I would be happy to find out. I know in other notice of funding opportunities that we've had, it's been written out specifically that people who work on those topics can get funded. There's another piece of this where to collect those samples. So knowing is one problem, Jessica. I think the other part is being able to collect samples. And so it's kind of that translation piece between the traditional knowledge to get it into the Western science pieces, having qualified environmental samplers go out there. And so we work really closely with the Zinder group, but that's something that they're working on is getting people who live in villages the qualifications to be able to pull those samples under the state of Alaska regulations. And so I can put a link in the chat, but building up communities so there's more qualified environmental samplers is something that we have talked about and worked on very relentlessly. So that is a hyper focus. And that's a particular passion project of mine. So I was almost kind of like gleefully laughing when you said, I'm like, I agree. I would love all of the villages to have a qualified environmental sampler out there. But that's, thinking either with the different universities or like Ilisavik up in Ukjavik, trying to get a program going there is something that we've long talked about and are trying to figure out. So I hear you. I perhaps don't have the best answer or a perfect solution at the time, but that is something that we are thinking a lot about. Does anyone else have any questions before I throw a couple of topics in for discussion? Yes, Claire. Please share.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, so just to chime in, pivoting a little bit, but I think EnviroAtlas was brought up, and the EPA's great resource of the near surface permafrost map for Alaska. And I was curious, I couldn't figure out in the metadata how frequently or if that's been updated since the big 2015 push from the plastic paper. And if not, just wanted to advocate as a potential partnership. A large bulk of the data comes from the NRCS in our Soil and Plant Science division, which I work for, and I mean, we only have so much data. Our entire past year of fieldwork has been stymied this summer due to budget cuts and losing staff. But anywhere we can help or provide point data, definitely are happy to do so.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Claire. That's very helpful to know. I the EnviroAtlas has historically been run out of our research division. I'm not actually entirely sure where it's landing going forward right now. We're in the middle of a fairly large reorganization right now with our researchers. So I don't know, Lauren, if you've heard exactly what's happening with EnviroAtlas or who it's going with.
I haven't, but Claire, do you mind putting your email in the chat and I can hook you up with some people because I do know that there's some folks who would love to chat with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And totally understood. We are also being
Yeah.
reorganized and moved around. So, but yeah, anyone who wants to chat, I can get them in touch with the right person.
Yeah. And I think our main person that we've been working with, who is vetted the development of that permafrost layer that you referenced. I don't think she's on the call today, but she'd love to talk with you. And she'll probably know the answer to who's running EnviroAtlas in the future.
Yes. So, you know, we've talked about EnviroAtlas and we have that POC available. I can't help but push, and Autumn and Sylvia are both on the call, but our Class 3 landfills research project is, you know, I think they've made some really wonderful connections. And so if anyone wants to talk about landfills, please let us know. We have some great folks that are working on that. Harmful algal blooms, I think we have resources, but we've lost some staff there. And so I think those folks are getting reorganized, but there's still a couple of staff folks who are working on that. So if anyone wants to talk about harmful algal blooms or collaborate there, I think that's something we're extremely engaged in and interested in. And then just at large infrastructure development is something that we've been very focused on. And so roads, industrial sites, or just villages for village relocations, I think those are all kind of similarly sized in largeness. But I think we really want to talk more there about subsidence specifically. Just trying to look at our list of things. And then wildfires. So if anyone wants to partner on wildfires too, I know we talked about that. Nicole, is there anything else you want to flag from what we're hearing where we know we still have staff available?
Thing comes to mind at this point in time.
Okay.
I think we've covered a lot of the topics. Thanks everybody for your comments and questions. It's great to chat with everyone about permafrost and to know that there's this great community who's using data like us and looking for data, and that we have collaborative paths forward.
I'll also put in the chat 2 new publications that came out the last week or two. One from Ben Jones and team.
Oh, yes.
Billy Connor and others in Point Lay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for doing that. I should have thought of Ben's work for Point Lay. It's so great.
Yeah.
So he did a really great paper. I just blanked.
I'll put it in the chat.
Or teammate behavior.
Yeah, I know we have co-authors here. So do you guys want to do a little, just a little comment about the Point Lay work? Billy, Connor, if you can hear us.
Yeah, I can hear it. Just had to push all the buttons to get it back on. Point Lay was really interesting. I actually started work out at Point Lay almost 20 years ago, looking at the very same problems that paper was pointing to. But the thing we were able to do was really start tying the climate impacts and the infrastructure impacts and the merger or the intersection between the two. And I think that's in my mind, that's one of the most important things that that paper was able to accomplish, because the science community tends to focus on the generalities, the macro impacts of thawing permafrost, and the engineering community tends to focus on the micro. We're looking at a specific point for a specific building or specific part of the infrastructure, and trying to blend those two data sets to make them useful is a real challenge, because we speak a little bit different language. Two, we have different purposes. But as was said earlier, the lack of data um, is true for the broad, but when we get down to the village level, we have actually quite a bit of data by the geotechnical information that has been gathered in the community. And then if you just stand there and look at things a little bit more carefully, you can infer a lot of information for that. I don't know how to bridge that gap, but at least this paper was an attempt to start bringing those two data sets and those two pieces of information together. And I think we were somewhat successful. I don't know that we were fully successful in that, but at least I'm hoping, if nothing else, that paper hopefully is getting people to start thinking about that intersection. And if we don't figure out that intersection, our success rate in uh, building infrastructure, building, maintaining, and operating infrastructure in the Arctic is going to be extremely difficult and getting worse. And so we have to do that. One of the things we also talked a little bit about was looking at the community and how the cumulative impacts of our infrastructure and climate interplay with each other. And engineers are very good at looking at a single structure, but very poor at looking at the cumulative impacts of infrastructure. And we're seeing it in spades at Point Lay, Wainwright, Utqiagvik, all of the North Slope, and then even out in the Seward Peninsula. I'm working at Diomede right now, and we've got a talus is starting to thaw, and the whole village looks like it may be going sliding into the ocean. And that's the project that I'm working on now. So hopefully you got something out of that, and hopefully I think the best thing that could happen with that effort is to spur some dialogue.
Thanks, Billy. That was so eloquent. That bridge is right where we're stuck. We're like sitting in the middle of that bridge. So often, as this like very high up, federal agency, we're not quite down the village level. We're like kind of sitting at this weird space. But that just listening to you is like such an eloquent way of putting where EPA is stuck. Because so often we're not on these very specific projects or very specific locations. We do dabble in that, like I was talking about with like our industrial sites. But then, we really do need this, very zoomed out version when we're looking at where are we building a hundreds of mile long road? Where is a pipeline going to be built? Then we have to really pull back on the scale of what we analyze versus just one landfill or one industrial site. So I really appreciated your time, and that's it was just it's always kind of reaffirming, I think, to me to hear, oh, everyone else is stuck kind of on the same problem. It's like good validation that when we're out doing things like this, if that, we're not alone and we're not just kind of like off in left field. We're kind of working together with everyone else in the same place and we're all going towards the same goal. So that's very nice to hear. It's terrible to hear about the problems, but nice to hear that we're all focused similarly. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Mhm. Anyone else want to share in our last few minutes before we wrap up? I really appreciate everyone coming to listen. Okay, I think we can call it then. Thank you everyone for coming today. It was really lovely to hear from you and chat with folks. And I'll put my email in the chat just in case anyone else has any questions, comments, or concerns. I would love to hear from you.
Thank you, Lauren and Nicole.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thanks.